Welcome. I'm Dustin Olson. I'm one of the pollsters here at American Pulse, and I wanted to bring people in and share with you a little bit of what we've been working on this week, specifically today. Yesterday, you may have seen that the Fed decided not to increase interest rates. Decided to pause things. They may be increasing them later this year, but we got some requests to do what is called a radio tour. So early this morning, I got up and started talking to morning news shows on news radio across the country. Started off, I believe, in Grand Rapids, and I decided to share a few of the interviews. I'm going to have three of those interviews here for you to listen to what they had to say about the Fed, about inflation, about different economic issues, and what our recent polling has said about economic issues. So stay tuned for that. We'll be able to hear some of those shows, as well as later I will have. Yesterday I stopped by Sirius XM and was on the Dan Abrams show on the POTUS network there. And you may know Dan Abrams from various legal TV shows, and he's on News Nation. And his guest host, Jesse Weber, was there. He's an anchor and a reporter for the Law and Crime Network. So we had an interesting conversation about the impeachment, about Merrick Garland, about is there infighting with Republicans on Capitol Hill, and just all sorts of different interesting issues. So we'll be going through that during the program today. And I just wanted to let you know that if you have any questions, especially on Facebook and a couple different places where we're streaming, you can post your questions. And if you happen to be in a place where it doesn't come to me directly right now, we will go in there and we'll check it out later and be able to answer any of your questions. And if you have any thoughts about questions we should ask in our next public poll, which we'll be having come out soon, please do let us know. Also, if you want to get free polling, if you want to get all of the insights, you can go to pollingclub.com. You can see it's down there. There's some information about that, but go to pollingclub.com and get free polling, as well as let us know what questions you'd like to have in the upcoming surveys. And of course, if you would like to commission your own poll or your own market research, if you have answers that you've been searching for, things that would help you be able to reach your audience better, be able to win in your market, please go to americanpulse.us and you can get a free quote and a research roadmap to answer those questions. So with that, I think I'm first going to go to our friends. This is going to be interesting. You're going to hear some of the same questions, but I started out early. People wanted to talk about what people are thinking, what public opinion is about inflation, about budgetary concerns people have, groceries, gas, the upcoming Christmas season, and buying gifts, all these things that people's concerns about the economy, and they wanted to have someone on to talk about that. So I went coast to coast, East Coast, West Coast. I went to upper Midwest to the lower Midwest. I did North Texas, South Texas, and talked to a bunch of shows. And these are a few where we talked a little about a few different things. And I think I'm going to go to first, I'm going to go to San Diego. I talked to Ted and LaDonna, who host the San Diego's morning news on Kogo AM there. And we talked about some of the economic concerns that people have there. People in California dealing with water issues, and there's new water fees there, and different issues that were of concern to them. So with that, I'm going to go to my interview with Ted and LaDonna on Kogo AM this morning in San Diego's morning news.
Kogo News Time is 5:41.
So the Federal Reserve announced Wednesday it's giving borrowers a bit of a break by pausing interest rate hikes. That pause follows 11 consecutive rate hikes by the Fed since March of 2022, which were done in a bid to try to temper inflation.
Joining us on the Kogo News Live Line, pollster Dustin Olson. And Dustin, what does this latest decision actually mean?
Well, thank you, Ted and LaDonna. As a pollster at American Pulse, what I really look for is what the American
people think. And we actually saw in the Fox News poll last week, a shocking 91% said they were concerned about inflation, the higher prices. So it seems, regardless of what the Fed's actions were yesterday or possible rate hikes later this year, it seems high costs at the grocery store or gas pump are now baked into daily life for families. So it's less Bidenomics and maybe a little bit more Bidenflation for folks.
So, let's talk about some of the major differences that we're seeing after all of these interest rate hikes, because they don't seem to have tempered inflation. Prices are demonstrably going up across almost every sector. You take a look at gas prices. We just got a water rate increase in San Diego. Yep. It's like consumers are getting hit from every available direction. And now with interest rates this high, even buying a home becomes nearly impossible.
Yeah, we've been watching. Well, there's a couple of things. We've done surveys across the country. 2023, we have a lot of municipal elections. We have other odd year elections, and we like to ask open-ended questions. Let people tell us in their own words what they think. And a common refrain that we get is feeling squeezed. That's what people say. So you just listed a whole bunch of reasons why people are feeling that, and it does appear that. Actually in New Hampshire, we just did a primary poll, and we asked Democrats what they thought, and affordable housing was the number one thing for them. They didn't say economy, but they said affordable housing, and then for Republicans, they said inflation. So people say it in their own words, but it's definitely the cost of things. This is already baked in, and I think there will be a political impact. As we saw in the recent Wall Street Journal poll, 63% said they disapprove of Joe Biden's handling of the inflation and rising costs. And in that poll, Donald Trump has a slight lead, though statistically tied with Joe Biden, which we're starting to see in other surveys.
Doesn't this go back before Joe Biden, though? I mean, it seems like it goes back multiple administrations, whether it's, goes back to the pandemic and whether it goes back to whoever was sitting in the White House.
Yeah, so as a pollster, I don't have to be the absolute best pollster on the planet to make the prediction that in Washington, government spending is going to go up, and you can see it now with all the budget talks and dealing with the debt and in the deficit. Right now, with interest rates going up, it makes debt that much more expensive and being able to service the debt. So we are starting to get into what I guess some people might call a doom loop, where you start to, you have to go into further debt just to pay for debt, and that can be a really dangerous thing for any organization.
All right. Pollster Dustin Olson joining us here on the Kogo News Live line. Yeah, that the interest rate pause, I think a lot of people are feeling pretty good about it. But, is it really enough? Thank you so much.
So hopefully you found that interesting. I thought they had some good insights, good questions as well. And it was interesting to see the perspective out there on the Pacific Coast and what people are thinking from their perspective. Next, I'm going to go to Michigan, to West Michigan's Morning News with Steve Kelly and Brett Bakita, and had a little bit of a different kind of a conversation. I will say that I think they don't have to pay as much as we do in the Washington, D.C. area for going out to dinner, which you'll see as you hear that. But regardless, it's a lot different wherever you live. And they had a really interesting conversation, and really did appreciate talking to them. Again, if you'd like to get any of our free polls, you can go to pollingclub.com, sign up there, and get all this stuff, and also encourage us to look at other topics. Actually, in one of our interviews here in a moment, I'm going to ask one of the hosts what they would like to ask, because there's a lot of interesting people out there, and let's be honest, what we're doing here is we're giving voice to the American people. That's ultimately what we do with public opinion, and that's the opportunity that we have. So with that, I'm going to go to West Michigan's Morning News with Steve Kelly and Brett Bakita, and that is on Grand Rapids, Michigan, WOOD, and here we go.
And this is West Michigan's Morning News. Steve Kelly, Brett with 1T, Bakita here as well. U.S. stocks closing lower yesterday after the Federal Reserve announced it would keep interest rates steady. We will discuss with our friend and pollster Dustin Olson just what that might mean for you. This is West Michigan's Morning News. Dustin, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
So they suggested, though, that those interest rates may remain higher for longer than previously expected. So talk to us about what went into yesterday's decision.
Yeah, so as I understand it, there's a possibility they may raise them again this year. But as a pollster, what I'm really interested in is what do real people think about this. And we've been doing polls all year, talking to voters across the country and a lot of large cities where municipal elections happen in the odd year. And what we're seeing is that the economy, rising costs, housing in particular, in these elections are top issues. And a common refrain, we ask people open-ended questions, how is this impacting you? And people say they're feeling the squeeze. So regardless of if they would have gone up or if they even had gone down, I think that a lot of the rising costs over the last 2 years, people are going to be paying more at the grocery stores. They're going to be paying more at the gas pump. So they're feeling it in their pocketbook. And I think you may have seen on the recent Fox News poll released last Friday, a shocking 91% said they were concerned about inflation and higher prices. So I don't think this is anything that's going away anytime soon.
And Dustin, I don't know how far you break it down as far as doing the different polls, but is that just what you said, kind of the number one topic? I know it is in my family as far as grocery bill, going out to eat. I mean, a family of four, you go out to eat, you might as well plan on $80 to $100 now, where it used to be, $50 back in the day.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. We actually did a survey in New Hampshire. Everybody's, looking at New Hampshire, what's going to happen in the primaries. And we asked Republicans and we asked Democrats what are the top issues for them. For Republicans, it was generally the economy. For Democrats, it was affordable housing. So they're all around costs, all around people's pocketbooks. So people have different concerns, but it's definitely these pocketbook issues.
I'm fascinated to know now, as you are the one that asked the question and get the answers, what more specifically about the economy have you asked? And because I want to know where I stand about this whole thing, because I'm totally with Brett. It seems to me that most of me and my people are worried about what stuff costs and how much higher it can go, right?
Yep. Well, this is interesting. So we asked, I'm actually going to give you a couple of real voters. These are all Democrats in New Hampshire. So we asked the question, what is the number one challenge facing New Hampshire that a U.S. president could have the greatest impact? This is, the first primary state. This is a Democrat who considers themselves to be liberal, and they said inflation, healthcare, student loan, and we asked them that, and then we also asked them if they thought Joe Biden should run again, and they said they thought he was too old. So it's interesting, actually. This is a liberal Democrat, and they inflation and age are two issues that I think the president in particular needs to be concerned about. Another person here who's a moderate Democrat, we asked them what's the number one issue facing them that a president could make the greatest impact, and they said inflation also. Now, they also said that he was too old and out of touch. So this is something that I think is really important. Another interesting poll recently, the Wall Street Journal did a poll a couple weeks ago, and they asked this question, and what do people think about Joe Biden's handling of inflation and rising costs? And 63% disapproved and 34% approved, which is even less than what the Democrat base is. So that's an indication this is something that I'm not quite sure if the president is probably happy this morning after what the Fed did yesterday.
Yeah, that is Dustin Olson, pollster. Thanks for your time this morning. Good stuff.
And that was it was Steve who I was talking to there, and I'm going to pull up this survey that I mentioned to Steve Kelly and Brett Bakita, and this is actually the responses. This is one of our verbatim reports. This is actually what I was looking at. And we have all the different demographic information. You see, this person's a liberal Democrat who's voting in the Democrat primary. That they said inflation, student loan, healthcare. They said we asked, do you think that? Well, first, do you think Joe Biden should run for re-election next year? And this person said probably no. And then if they said that, then we said, why do you think Joe Biden should run? And this is what they said verbatim. You can see it right there. That's the actual report that they said too old. And I don't talk about this in interviews, but something as I've been going through these surveys, it does appear to me kind of the biggest chink in the armor, the Achilles heel for Joe Biden is age, as well, of course, as inflation. And in particular with Democrats, they want to say other things about him, but they talk about affordable housing or they talk about other things. They don't really want to say that he's been bad at the economy, but they use other terms. So you see, here's our this is what we call a word cloud. This is in the same survey. So up here you see economy and inflation. That's the Republicans, and then here's the Democrats, and we have affordable housing and housing and a few other things that are like that. They also have economies big. You have climate change is also a big one, so you can tell where people are getting their news. Very interesting though, but that was much different community than San Diego. That was in Michigan, but uh, the interesting thing is when somebody wants to talk to you about these things and you have a bunch of interviews. So I just sat here and just called each of the stations and we talked and called the next one, talked and then called the next one and really was fun. The next one I really enjoyed was Chad Dixon, who was guest hosting for Dallas's morning news, the Dallas Fort Worth morning news on KLIF 570 in Dallas, and we got to talk a little bit more than just about inflation and the Fed and interest rates. We got into he actually brought up the issue of the indictments and how that's playing. So here we are now in Dallas.
Going to raise interest rates. We're not lowering them. They're going to stay the same. Joining us now is pollster Dustin Olson. Dustin, good morning. How are you? And thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Chad. It's great to be here.
Now, what do you make of this? Now, from what I'm looking at, the 30-year fixed mortgage rate is just over about 8%. That's insanely high. It's obviously been higher before, but the cost of housing was a lot less back then, so it didn't matter as much as it does now. Yep. What do you make of this, and where do you see things going?
Well, as a pollster at American Pulse, what I really think about and care about is what Americans, like real families, what they're saying. And I think regardless of the Fed's actions yesterday or even a possible rate hike later this year, it seems high costs at the grocery store, at the gas pump are now really baked into daily life for families. So instead of Bidenomics, it seems voters are feeling Bidenflation. And we actually saw it in the Fox News poll last week. A shocking 91% said they were concerned about inflation and higher prices. So this is very much on the front end of people's thoughts.
Have you done a poll on what people are blaming or what people are saying led to this? Because when I think of inflation, I think of us handing out a bunch of money for COVID. That's Republicans and Democrats. They both voted to do that. That's not just blame one side or the other. Both decided to do that. Is that, according to what you're seeing, is that what people are blaming and just government spending in general?
Yeah, well, in that Fox News poll, that's actually one of the things that people are, unfortunately for the president, I would say that voters are laying the blame at his feet. And actually, they said since March, it's actually increased. They believe that the White House is actually doing more to harm inflation than help. So, I don't know if people know exactly all the different ins and outs, but obviously we're talking about spending at this point, and it's very clear that when interest rates are higher and you are going into debt, that's going to have a big impact on debt payments and everything else. So this is a real big concern for folks.
Have you done anything that looks at the future? And by that, I mean holiday spending. We're about to hit that. I know that retailers are actually not hiring as many seasonal workers this year. They're expecting it to be down. Are people expecting this time of year to be are they expecting things to be a little more tight in the old budget?
Yeah, well, yes, we actually have asked this question. We do what we call open-ended questions in a lot of our surveys. So American Pulse has done surveys in a lot of municipal elections in 2023, as well as other odd-year elections. And we ask an open-ended question, what do you think in your own words? And a common refrain that people say is feeling squeezed. So, regardless of all the numbers and the dollars and everything else and what the Fed is doing, I looked at their report yesterday. For real people, this is about, they know that their groceries are more expensive. They can feel it in their budgets, and that is only going to have an impact on Christmas spending and everything else. People are going to be feeling this, as well as we actually did a recent survey in New Hampshire looking at the primaries. We talked to Democrats, we talked to Republicans, and Republicans said economy and inflation in their own words. And Democrats, they don't want to, give a bad report card for the president, but they said affordable housing. So that's obviously, you mentioned what mortgage rates are, very high. So this is affecting everybody, even if they don't really want to admit it on their own side for Democrats.
For 2023, has there been anything in your polling that you've seen, whether it's about interest rates, whatever, this year, has there been anything you've seen that has kind of shocked you? I hate to put you on the spot. Like I said, it doesn't have to tie to this, but anything that you have found out about the American people this year that kind of blew you away?
Yeah, so I will say this is a very interesting one. This has nothing to do with inflation, but we did a survey in the last few weeks with Republican primary voters nationally, and our interviewers told me it's the most swearing they've ever seen in a survey. We asked them what people thought about the indictments of Donald Trump, and BS. People said it in their own words, but
right.
That was the number one term that people said, and 76% used that, political witch hunt. But BS was the number one thing that people said, and 76% of Republican primary voters, which is more than his actual vote percentage, have very strong feelings about that. That's probably the thing that's actually shocked me the most. But, we can ask anything, and if people go to pollingclub.com, they can get actually free access and suggest topics for the next American Poll survey, which will be going in the field next week. And actually, what would be a question that you would be interested in asking, Chad?
Boy, you're putting it on me. I almost want a question about that. You said this is the first time they used kind of foul language. Mm-hmm. I am fascinated with why people are so emotional about it. Yeah. Why are you, because that was the question I was going to ask you following that. Why do you think people are so emotional about it? For the longest time, let's start off just presidents before the internet. We didn't really know a lot about them. Politics, you grew up, you didn't talk about religion, you didn't talk about money, you didn't talk about politics. Now we live in a culture where we talk about everything, all three of those things. And I'm just fascinated by the fact I'm old school. If you meet me, you probably don't know that I do a talk show, or that I'm conservative, or that I'm in any way or the other, or how much money I make. Even though you look at my clothes, you can tell I'm poor. But yeah, I always wonder, and I really do to just, the stuff, my personal life is what affects me. How my relationship is with my wife, my daughter, my mom, my dad. That's what affects my mood. I don't necessarily get outraged with what's going on in Capitol Hill. And so I am fascinated with why people get so bent out of shape about politics.
Well, we asked a question in both a general election question as well as in that Republican primary question about whether people agree or disagree with the idea that there's a double standard in the legal and justice system. And 89.7% of Republicans nationally believe this. The most recent survey we did in New Hampshire, which was all voters, it was actually 77.7% of all voters. That means Democrats and Republicans. The majority of Democrats agreed with that. So I think there's a sense of injustice in all of it, and the use of the legal and justice system. And you saw Merrick Garland being brought in front of Congress yesterday. There's a real sense that things aren't working the way they're supposed to. I think that's what I see in the surveys and why that was so heated, and I guess an unfairness about it. But who knows? We'll have to see. We really are having fun asking people just what they really think about this, because if you are expecting anything in politics, you should expect the unexpected these days.
Dustin Olson, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really do appreciate it, sir.
Thanks, Chad. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Time.
And that was Chad Dixon on Dallas Fort Worth Morning News this morning, and that's those are the ones I wanted to pull from our inflation and the Fed interest rates pausing series that we did earlier. And next, I'd like to go to yesterday. I went and did an interview with SiriusXM on the Dan Abrams show. If you've watched things like Live PD, I think he used to be on that, and all sorts of different legal stuff. He's always been one of those people who's out there as a legal commentator. Actually, I was on with Jesse Weber, who was guest hosting for him, who's an attorney and also an anchor and reporter for the Law and Crime Network. He's also a contributor at News Nation, where I believe Dan Abrams also works. But it was a very interesting conversation, a little bit more of the legal aspect. He has a little bit of a different perspective than I do. And I was able to share with him some of our recent polling. So we talked about the debt, the deficit. We talked about budget dealings. We're talking about his view that there's infighting on Capitol Hill. That's there's a lot of melodrama, I think, going on, but I don't know that it's necessarily as much as being made out to be. And then ultimately talking about people's concerns about the legal and justice system, which we just talked about. When we come back from that, I'm going to share a little bit more information that I had talked about with him. In particular, some polling around this idea that if there's infighting with Republicans, it's actually people are pretty consistent from our most recent Republican survey. And then additionally, some really interesting things on the idea of the Biden impeachment for the alleged influence peddling and how that breaks down by what media that you watch, which I thought was fascinating. It was not what I expected, especially with CNN and MSNBC viewers. So when we come back from that, I'll mention some of those numbers. And of course, if you are looking to do a survey yourself, if you would like to figure out a little bit more about your market and how your product, how your services could be able to be better marketed to them, you can go to AmericanPulse.us and you can get a free quote. We'll work with you to put together a free research roadmap to be able to come up with a survey that will really answer the questions that you've been searching for. So please go to AmericanPulse.us if that's of interest to you. Otherwise, pollingclub.com, get the free polls. Let us know any topics you'd like to have. But next, I'm going to go to my interview with Jesse Weber on the Dan Abrams show on SiriusXM. Here we go.
$6,887. All right, so I want to talk about this more. So you can call in about either Merrick Garland or Republicans. I'm going to focus on the Republicans right now, but you can call in throughout the show to talk about any topic or whatever it is you want to talk about. But I want to bring in right now Dustin Olson, who is the managing partner and director of consulting at Olson Strategies and Advertising. He's a pollster at American Pulse Research and Polling and host of the podcast Political Trade Secrets. And he joins us now. Dustin, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me, Jesse. Looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. Let's take a step back and just talk about why the infighting is happening right now in the Republican camp. Is it all about spending right now? Is that what they can't agree on?
Well, I don't know that I would necessarily agree that there's a lot of infighting. Anytime you get any group of people together, there's going to be different opinions. But I think this really is a case of there's a 4-seat majority. Really, there's four votes. 5-seat majority. There's 4 votes that really are at play. So what happens is you have 4 people can be very important, and they can bring up their own parochial concerns. So I think that's part of what we're seeing, and various people have their own concerns. If you're talking about the impeachment for the inquiry, one of the things we saw, we actually did a survey of Republicans nationally during the August recess, and we saw that 83%, 5 out of 6 Republicans wanted to see the Biden impeachment inquiry happen. So my guess is all the Republicans went home during the break. They heard about it, and then they got back, and that's why we're seeing this happen. As far as spending goes, this is what it looks like every few months or every year. You have to have a crisis before anything ever happens. And whether you're a Democrat or Republican, it looks this way every single time. It's partly just a problem of the design of the system. But people, I mean, it's predictable every single year. Right up until Christmas, one side's going to be, accusing the other side of being the Grinch that stole Christmas, and we'll be having these kinds of talks. And ultimately, I was a little bit surprised that Kevin McCarthy pulled out the win that he did back in May on the spending compromise. And, so there may be a little bit of their success in May is something that Republicans have to deal with now.
But focusing on the spending for a moment, walk us through what the division is. And this, I guess the simple way that I look at it is, there's an idea of trying to put together a short spending bill, a spending measure right now that could provide immediate funding in the interim. But you have certain people in the Republican camp who, again, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems they want to have the larger conversation about spending right now, and that we can't kick the can down the road. We have serious issues of over government spending, and they feel now is the time to have that conversation, and that they're not even agreeing to immediate relief. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, I don't know that if there's one thing I could predict, no matter what, and regardless of what anybody's position is on any of these issues, is I can predict, and I'll put it at like 100% odds, that government spending is going to go up in the next year and probably for the foreseeable future. There's only been a couple of times that we've defied gravity over the years. So I think that is pretty predictable that that's what's going to happen. And there are definitely members of Congress on both sides that have decided that's something that they want to make an issue, and they should. I mean, it makes sense. We spend. I mean, we just had 33 trillion, I think,
Right.
on debt, which is remarkable. But any idea that either side is really serious about curbing that significantly is not true. My guess is if you go to any one of the individuals, that they have a parochial reason that they can see right now from their own personal interests. This doesn't say anything about any one of them individually. It's just, if you think about it from incentives and disincentives, their personal interests, they have something, their pet issue. They know they can get their time in the limelight now, that if they create a situation of maximum pressure, that they're going to be able to get the attention and, ultimately, whatever it is. Like Matt Gaetz, my personal opinion is he probably is looking to run for governor at some point, and this is a great way to increase his low dollar donors and put himself in a better position. So my guess is if you pull back the curtain on any one of these, they have their own personal interests that they're looking at.
Of course, that's been, a tale as old as time. I guess the question is, I don't understand timing. I'm here with Dustin Olson, managing partner and director of consulting at Olson Strategies, host of the podcast Political Trade Secrets. Again, the thing that I don't understand is the timing of this. We have 2024 around the corner. You would think that Republicans would want a united front, give American people who are watching all of this an option over the Democrats. And in where you can argue that President Biden is maybe in a weakened state, you might be able to attack. There's what's going on with his son. There's what's going on with the economy, foreign policy. There are ways for them to look into it. And you would expect for them to give the American people a united front, an option. And again, you might not call it infighting, but I'm seeing a lack of consensus between moderates and hardliners. And I'm wondering, are they dropping the ball at a time when they really could have been using this political capital to their advantage?
Well, I'm not going to go out on a limb for any politician and say that they don't have the ability to drop the ball. However, in this case, with the impeachment inquiry in general, I think Democrats are going to get to wear their words from a couple of years ago around their neck, which is ultimately people can walk and chew gum at the same time. Now, I'm not sure if that any specific member of Congress is capable of that. However, that is what the argument for the last couple of impeachments as far as that goes. And ultimately, as far as I can see, there's absolute consensus as far as that goes. As far as spending goes, Republican primary voters are clearly wanting to have a curb of spending. However, the devil's all in the details. So as far as people having their different interests on that, that's why this never gets done. And as far as one of the things that we saw in our recent national Republican primary survey is that 89.7% agreed that there is a double standard in the legal system, which I heard you talking about earlier. No matter what any specifics are about that, that is a near universal opinion. And also, I'd have to pull the number up, but we did a survey in New Hampshire where we actually talked to Democrats and Republicans alike, and there was a strong majority that felt the same way there. So this is a common point of view that there's an idea that there's a double standard in the legal system. So I don't know that
and I find that to be I find that to be unfortunate, because I'm an attorney and I look at every single case and every single situation and look at the facts of it and see, well, you can't just say, oh, they're going easy on Hunter Biden and going tough on Trump. Well, they're charged and they're implicated in two completely different things. And we don't know what else is going to come out about Hunter Biden. So for me, when I come on here, one of the things that I try to do is to look at this from dispassionately and look at it from, what the facts are and say, is it really two-tiered? Is it just political weaponization or no? And I have to tell you, are there mistakes, in my opinion, made by the FBI and the DOJ? Absolutely. But I'm also of the opinion that you can't just create this blanket slate. And it's unfortunate to me that no matter that analysis, majority of the people will look at this and think whatever it is they want to think about. That's one of the reasons why I think the impeachment inquiry is so important for Republicans. It's not necessarily finding that smoking gun. It's creating more bad publicity for the Bidens.
Possibly. I would say that what matters is perceptions, and this is really what the legal system is based on. Is if it has credibility, then it's credible. If it doesn't have credibility, it doesn't have credibility. I mean, it's just that simple. If people don't believe in it, then that's a problem. And I will just say the fact of the matter is it is universal across parties that there's a belief that there's a double standard in the legal system, and it's overwhelmingly the belief of Republicans. And I would say, it goes all the way back to 2016 and the start of the Russia collusion hoax that a lot of people started thinking, wow, this is crazy. And even you could give Hillary Clinton credit. She would also say the FBI's handling of the email situation right before the election, that also had an impact. So there are plenty of PR issues that have happened over the years from both sides that has led people to think, I don't know that this is a good situation. And I wouldn't put it on Republicans in the House. I mean, most of that time they were out of power, but this is a problem in the media in particular, and also with the Justice Department. They have not handled things in a way that the American people. I mean, it's just, I can just look at the numbers and it tells me that there's something going on there. And most of the media, it doesn't actually. One of the interesting things we found on the impeachment inquiry, there are actually some Republicans who watch MSNBC and CNN. And that's the number one place that they get their news. And even when we look at that, 58% of those who have MSNBC or CNN as their number one news source, even they think it's time to move forward with the impeachment. So
really?
I have no idea exactly why. Yeah, it is interesting. Obviously, there's a difference by about 30%.
Well, I do wonder, and I do wonder if they could say, hey, listen, I think an impeachment inquiry is a good thing, because if it comes out there's really nothing, then it's going to fall in Republicans' faces, and maybe they're like, go ahead, Joe Biden has nothing to hide, and maybe they could use it as a way as a weapon for Joe Biden going into 2024. I mean, that maybe, I don't know.
It's possible. I mean, who knows? I mean, this is the fascinating about politics. Anything could happen, but
Right.
there's definitely there's a bit of a I don't know. We didn't ask this question. We're going to be doing a survey next week to national general election voters, which if anybody would like to give their suggestions as to what questions we should ask, we have Republicans and Democrats as part of our polling club. You can go to pollingclub.com, sign up, and you can give us suggestions for topics and questions. I'm actually curious to see, because in this last survey, I got the sense that there was a bit of revenge, honestly, from Republicans on this topic, and but we don't know. I'm just, that's my hunch, but we need to ask some questions to find out what people think. And also, one thing we found in our New Hampshire survey recently, where we talked to Democrat primary voters, they will not say bad things about President Biden. However, a strong plurality would like to see someone else run. And I think a euphemism that people will say is that he's too old, but the impeachment inquiry, other things. I mean, there's at some point, Democrats who'd like to see someone else, they might start helping move things along, because it is very clear that people would like to see somebody a little bit with fewer problems on the Democrat side as well. And they use age as the issue.
Well, listen, I mean, that was my central point, is that Republicans have grounds, they have ammunition to use, and they should be more united than they are right now. And why are they not? That was one of the questions I posed to the callers, about whether Republicans are perhaps dropping the ball. And speaking of which, I'm going to take your calls in a minute, again, about these two issues, about whether or not, Attorney General Merrick Garland testifying right now in front of the GOP-led House Judiciary Committee about political bias in the DOJ, your thoughts on how he's doing, your thoughts on that issue, and the separate issue of whether Republicans are dropping the ball right now. But again, you can call in at 866-967-6887. I'm here with Dustin Olson, managing partner and director of consulting at Olson Strategies and Advertising, as he was just talking about, pollster at American Pulse Research and Polling, and host of the podcast Political Trade Secrets. Dustin, let me ask you about Kevin McCarthy, who is in tough position for him, right? Trying to balance all of these competing interests. You have those hardliners like Matt Gaetz, who's saying or threatening a vote of no confidence and whether or not he's going to retain his speakership position. What do you think the fate of Kevin McCarthy is?
I think he's going to end up doing well, and I think we're going to see possibly, I don't think it'll go to however many votes it was for speaker, but one thing as you can tell with Matt Gaetz is that he does get timing, and he gets timing for himself, and he sees the point of maximum leverage, and I think that's what we're going to see there. But we've also seen that he was willing to work out a deal at some point. So from his perspective, he's doing probably something that's great for him politically. Whether people like it or not, I'm guessing from his perspective, it makes sense. And then from Kevin McCarthy's perspective, he has a very narrow margin for his speakership. And so far, I've only met Speaker McCarthy a few times in person. He's very intelligent. I would say he's navigated his narrow majority fairly well, even going through all those the votes for speaker. And to be quite frank, there's a little bit of a difference between Republicans and Democrats. Republicans are generally pretty fiercely independent. Democrats generally are more likely to toe the party line, and Republicans like having some of this back and forth, to be quite frank. And I think the speaker votes honestly provided him with the ability to be a stronger speaker than he would have been if it had been just monolithic going into it. So it's possible that this is going to be the same thing here. I will say the last spending deal, where Biden had gone for 100 days without talking to McCarthy. Ultimately, the Democrats fumbled that, and McCarthy got a pretty good deal. Now, that last success is stale, so we'll see if it can happen again. I don't know if it'll be exactly the same situation, but he's already shown some ability to maneuver. So my guess is he's going to do just fine. And as far as what's going to happen next year, I mean, this is one thing I can tell people. If you think that the thing that's never happened in American politics is never going to happen, you're probably going to be surprised, because it seems like every single cycle we get something. So all those people that think they know We don't know. I mean, a year from now, things are going to be crazy. A week from now, things are going to be crazy.
Yeah. We've living in unprecedented times is something that I keep saying.
Yes.
Seems like every week, not even every month, every year, but every week. Dustin Olson, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Everybody can check out his podcast, Political Trade Secrets. And again, Dustin is the managing partner and director of consulting at Olson Strategies and advertising and a pollster at American Pulse Research and Polling. Thanks so much, Dustin. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate it. That was a fun back and forth, and I think Jesse is very talented and is obviously moving up in the world, as he was just named a contributor at News Nation recently, and doing well with his various productions, doing media and legal matters. I'm going to go to a little bit of what I was talking about there. I guess I did talk about it in that about the media, but on the infighting. So specifically, he's talking about there's a few members of Congress who are using this moment to get the maximum point of leverage. And I'll stand by that. I think even with all the rigmarole, it's going to ultimately, things are going to be fine. I also am not going to go out on a limb and say that Republicans aren't capable of totally fumbling whatever advantage that they have. I mean, I've seen that numerous times in my years. So unfortunately, that's definitely something that's possible. But I've also seen Democrats overreach many times, and just it's kind of how things happen. Republicans fumble, Democrats overreach, and things ultimately, well, we're all going to get up tomorrow morning. But looking at the how Republicans are pretty unified in our most recent Republican primary poll. Nationally, roughly 60% back Donald Trump in the primaries. That's the case in most surveys. Politically, 76% believe the indictments against Trump are politically motivated or BS, as I talked about earlier. And so that's more people than even say they're going to vote for him in the primary, which, by the way, doesn't mean that they don't like him, because for Ron DeSantis, the number two choice, if you're a Ron DeSantis supporter, your number one choice as your second choice, the person you would go with if he wasn't running, is Donald Trump. Same thing for Vivek Ramaswamy and several of the candidates. Mike Pence as well. If you're a Mike Pence supporter, your backup is Donald Trump. So, you know, he's well liked. So that's pretty unified, honestly. 83% of Republicans want to see Biden impeached, and we have 89.7% agree there is a double standard in the legal system. So, as far as Republican voters go, they're pretty unified when it comes to all these things. And I mentioned the media. It is pretty remarkable just how MSNBC and CNN viewers, who we know they don't get most of the Biden uh, problems around the laptop. There's a few things that are talked about in other media, like Biden lying about knowing about the laptop and saying it was Russian disinformation, even though he knew at the time that it wasn't. Him living above his means for years. Um, just all sorts of different things that other media is going to talk about, and they don't talk about on MSNBC or CNN. Yet 58% of people who get their news from that also think that impeachment is something that should be moved forward on. And if you watch Newsmax, you're not going to be shocked to find out that 92% agree, and it's 83.5% strongly agree, as well as Fox News is 90.4% with 77.9% strongly agree. So uh, clearly, where you get your media does matter. However, it doesn't matter 100%, seeing that CNN and MSNBC viewers are open to the idea and pushing for it. So that's a little bit of what I had for you tonight, and hopefully you found it interesting and getting to see what it looks like to cover a topic across the country, going on news radio, then getting to talk about some of the legal issues around some of the news topics that are out there right now. And of course, if you'd like to be a part of this conversation, if you'd like to tell us what topics you'd like us to do some surveys on, if you'd like to have some suggestions for questions for our next survey, please do let us know. I've gotten a lot of input from people in the last week on our next survey, and I really do appreciate it. There's some great stuff around border security, human trafficking, on wokeism in schools, and all sorts of stuff. People have all sorts of ideas, but also just interesting things around media, like where do you get your social media from? Where do you go for your news? All these kinds of questions. These are all things that, if you're thinking strategically, if you're interested in politics, if you're a local candidate, you can find some stuff out that might be helpful to you on your campaign. So go to pollingclub.com. You'll see it there below. You also see that we have the little button up there, I guess. You see the little QR code. You can take a picture of that, and that'll get you there as well. But also, if you'd like to get a quote for your own research project, go to americanpulse.us. But thank you very much for joining me tonight, and hope you found it interesting, and have a great day. Appreciate you stopping by.